They have a binding effect that grows stronger with every hint of resistance. We look at our chains and first glance and feel the cold and uncomfortable presence, only to slowly feel their false warmth and security. Their familiarity becomes welcome. We form an addiction to the lack of hope we are fed and find contentment in the vast ocean of nothingness. Let me tell you something, my friend. Hope is a dangerous thing. We sit staring into our future that has no distinction from our present. There is no tomorrow will be better. There is only our present reality that carries the strong weight of forever. The saddest thing is these chains are so heavy and so dark that if we were asked to describe the reality, we would only faintly be able to describe them and know very little about their true image. Our chains not only bind us, but they have begun to define our very existence. This existence is dark and without hope. Let me tell you something, my friend. Hope is a dangerous thing. Just as we have accepted the binding warmth and hopelessness that are our chains, something happens. Nothing really happens, but something changes. At first, the light stings our dark, adapted eyes, and then slowly our vision adjusts, and we see a faint image of ourselves. The darkness still overwhelms, but we can see a slight image of ourselves, chained and hopeless. As light pours in, the image becomes more clear, and we begin to see the cold, the despair, and the truth. While we continue to sit in our chains, something drastic has changed. We no longer feel the warmth of binding chains, but rather their true coldness. We no longer feel as though the present moment is a representation of everything that is to come. We can see something different, something worth hoping for. Hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies. So last week, Neil spent a good amount of time talking about sin and brokenness. And last week, y'all wrote these laments as you said, "How long, O Lord, how long will we stay in this brokenness?" And y'all wrote these amazing laments that were awesome to read this week. And we just had some of them read, and it was so cool to hear you guys write those words. And then you made these chains. And these chains were kind of a representation of the things that you feel like bind you in this world, the things that hold us back. And we have these elaborate chains that have been made that represent all of those things. And tonight I want to look a little bit beyond these chains, a little bit beyond this binding hopelessness that I kind of just described. You see, in the Hunger Games, the character Katniss is our hero, right? Yes. Good. Thank you for being alive. Katniss is our hero. And as the story goes on, we learn, especially as it gets into the second one, Catching Fire, we learn that Katniss has done something in this world that they live in, right? They live in this world called Panem. And the capital controls everything that goes on. And so they live in this binding world. And what Katniss starts doing is exposing the way that they're really living. And she helps the people start to see that what they are living in is not really the best of worlds. What she starts doing is giving the people hope for something more. And she starts giving them hope because she starts exposing what is really happening in their world. Starts exposing the reality that is the capital. She starts exposing the reality that is the world that they are living in. The chains that bind them, they finally start to see. And so things start to change in their culture. And people start to look at these things and say that they don't any longer want to be bound by those chains. And so they start doing things a little bit different. And this is all sparked by Katniss doing these few little actions. Tonight I want to look in the Gospel of Matthew. In the very beginning of Matthew, in chapter 4, verse 17, Jesus says this: "Change your hearts and lives. Here comes the kingdom." Now this is a short, quick statement that seems pretty simple, but in reality this is a very loaded statement. At this point in Matthew, Jesus has just gotten done being in the desert for 40 days. So he's been out in the desert for 40 days. You all know that story, right? Jesus was in the desert. Who was in the desert with him? The devil, right? And the devil was tempting him, right? And so Jesus was out in the desert, didn't eat, didn't drink, none of those things, had no comforts whatsoever, and was tempted by the devil during this time. And so Jesus is in this dark, dreary place, I have to imagine. And Jesus comes out of that dark, dreary place and comes back to town. And they say that Jesus starts proclaiming the statements. He says, "Change your hearts and your lives. The kingdom is coming." Now that's kind of an odd statement from someone who's just been in pretty much darkness and persecution for the past 40 days. But he brings about this new thing, this new light. Now see, when we look at that statement, the kingdom is coming, it seems pretty simple, but that is a very, very loaded statement within the Jewish culture in which he is saying it. See, to say that the kingdom is coming is to refer to the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God, which those are just synonyms for one another. Depends on which gospel you read, but some will say kingdom of heaven, some will say kingdom of God. And so Jesus says the kingdom is coming. And they know what he is referring to is when God will come and rule once again on creation. And so they know exactly what he's saying, but the problem with what he's saying is that he has no power and authority to say those things. And so Jesus comes and starts declaring these statements that the kingdom is coming, but he has no authority to say that. And so people start to look at him a little bit funny, because he is a man that there's no reason why he should be able to declare this. Somewhat authority figure within the Jewish culture should be saying this. A Pharisee, someone who knows the law, someone who has truly studied it. But Jesus starts coming and making these statements that change things. And slowly the culture starts to change. And what Jesus does is he starts to change things, is he slowly starts to poke holes in the culture. And as he slowly starts to poke holes in the culture, it is like he is exposing light into the culture. Now see, you have to imagine at this point, you imagine Israel, these people that are living in Roman persecution, under Roman rule, not really able to fully worship their God as they would like to, being persecuted for worshiping that God. They are sitting in just dense darkness, complete absence of light. Have you all ever heard that, like, true darkness is the complete absence of light? What I'm talking about? How many of you have ever been, like, in a cave before? You ever been caving? So you know that if you go deep into a cave, right, and you turn out all the lights, it's just complete darkness, right? And like when you're in your room at night, eventually when the lights go out, your eyes tend to start to adjust, right? Like eventually you'll be able to kind of see enough to get up and walk around and not like run into your dresser or something else, right? Your eyes adjust. But if you're in a cave and you're in complete lack of light, complete absence of light, your eyes will never adjust to it. Your eyes never, ever adjust to it. You never will see anything. And so imagine this nation of Israel, this nation of God worshipers, are sitting in a world of complete darkness. And Jesus comes and he says something like, the kingdom of heaven is coming. And he pokes a hole in that light or in that darkness. And then in Matthew 5, Jesus says, I have come not to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. And Jesus pokes a hole in Jewish culture. And then in Matthew 8, Jesus heals those who cannot be healed. And he pokes a hole into our understanding of the possible. And then in Matthew 9, Jesus says to the tax collector, come and follows me. And he pokes a hole in the social boundaries. In Matthew 16, Jesus says, those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who want to save their life will pick up their cross and follow me. And he pokes a hole in the understanding of self. In Matthew 19, Jesus says to a rich man, if you really want to be rich, sell everything and follow me. And he pokes a hole in the idea of wealth. And then finally, in Matthew 28, Jesus steps out of the tomb and he gives the whole world hope. See, what Jesus slowly does is pokes holes in this culture. Just like this image that I had David work on for me this week. One by one, Jesus starts to poke holes in this dark room that the Jewish people are sitting in. And slowly they start to see the world that they are really in. And they realize the persecution that they have. But it's beyond just realizing the persecution. It's realizing there is a hope for something better. They realize that there is something greater to come. That this kingdom that Jesus is speaking about is going to be better than anything that they can imagine. It's like they forget about what they're in and they just look at what is to come. And tonight I want us to really kind of think about what hope is for us. In the Hunger Games, hope represents, for the capital, something to be scared of. They're scared of hope because hope gives people power. Hope helps people change things around them. Hope gives you something to look forward to. And in Jesus' culture, Jesus comes and pokes holes in society and gives the people something worth living for, something worth going forward worth. This week I was kind of haunted by this statement. Hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things. We should take pride in our problems because we know that trouble produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. All of the things that we have written up here are things that represent hope for us. Because Jesus came and poked holes in culture and society and gave us a way to see something better, we look at these things not as just things that bind us, but we look at things that help produce character for us, that help produce endurance, that lead us towards hope. So tonight, as you head to your small groups, I want you to consider where it is that Jesus is producing hope in your life. Just as Jesus came and poked holes and shone light into a situation, Jesus is still currently doing that in our lives now. And we are becoming a part of that as well.